Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Conversations About Art. My name is Alan Constant. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm here with Paul Rowland, who lives right outside of Tokyo, Japan. Today, we're going to be talking to Robin Olsen, a mixed media painter from Portland, Oregon. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoyed your interviews here, so I'm really honored to be included. Thank you.
That's really good to hear. I'm glad to hear that people are actually watching them. So, before we get started looking at your paintings, I'd like to ask you about your background in art. You know, how you got started in art, if you went to school any place. So, tell us a bit about how you got to where you are.
Sure. It's a very long, many year path, so I'm going to try to hit just some highlights of it. I started into a commercial art program. I was an art kid, so when I saw commercial art, I thought, fantastic, I can make a living and do art. So I signed up for that. That was at a technical school. And it was 5 days a week, 6 hours a day of art only. And I was in love with it. The first term was all drawing, and then the second term was all black and white design. The third term was all color theory, color design. So, really solid, good foundation. And I thought, boy, this is it. I love it. And then it turned to the commercial side of things, and I didn't love it so much anymore. This was pre-computer, and so it was doing a lot of font design by hand, using ruling pens, compasses, very tedious work, not at all what I had in mind. So I dropped out of that, and I ended up in regular college, and I went and I got my PhD in English. And along the way, I had given up art entirely. And but along the way, I was feeling all the stress of trying to write a dissertation. And I saw a in the San Francisco Chronicle, there was an article about an art quilt, and I had never in my life heard of art quilts. And it captured my attention. It was just a spectacular piece, all geometric in space and very interesting. So, just in order to relieve some of the stress of the PhD program, I started taking quilting classes. Very basic, but immediately I just fell in love with choosing color. I was thrilled playing with value. That really caught me in quilts, that if you change the values in a block, you got an entirely different quilt. And I also loved when you put quilt blocks together, they started getting secondary patterns would form and be a surprise. And that all those things really captivated me. So I played with that for a while. I never got particularly good. It was just something to relieve stress. And then I'm going to jump forward a bit into when painting started. And that was when I was home with my two young boys. And I just had this overwhelming urge to learn how to paint. I had never painted, I never faced a blank canvas. I'd used paint in a lot of things, but I never faced a blank canvas. And I got somehow stumbled on this book called Art, Paint, and Passion by Michelle Cassou. And it was all about intuitive painting. And so what I did every day, I'd put my two sons down for their nap, and we had a small house, and I'd go into my laundry room, and if I closed the door in the laundry room, I had a little bit of wall space that I could paint on. I put up a piece of cardboard, and every day for probably about a year, I would tack up a cheap piece of paper on that cardboard. I used my kids' cheap paints, I used my kids' cheap brushes, and I painted. And it was all about just listening to what was inside and some days it was abstract, some days it was a cow in space. It was, whatever wanted to come out. It was about letting things come out, not editing, not trying to play by any rules, just expressing yourself in art and painting. And that was really fun. I had a really good time with it. But after about a year, I spread all those paintings out on the living room floor, and I noticed that a year of painting, and I was really not getting any better. It was like they all kind of looked the same after all that time. And the point was not to get better; it was just to be expressing yourself. So at that point, I thought, I want to learn how to paint, and so I started taking painting classes in colleges and art centers. all the traditional things, painting still lifes, how to make glass look like glass, all of those things. But when I was doing that, I found I kept wondering what is the connection between painting like this and the way I was painting in my laundry room? There was like absolutely no connection. I was learning a lot of technical skills, but that expression was totally missing. And I kept trying to bridge that together. And I would take representational classes from people who painted a little looser, thinking maybe that was going to help. And it took many, many years of different classes, mixed media of all sorts, trying to find my way of what felt right to me, of bridging that technical knowledge I had from school, the intuitive painting, all of these things. How do they fit together? And finally, this was maybe 15 years ago, I took a workshop with Steve Imony up in Victoria, BC, and it was I think he called it the language of abstraction, and that was absolutely the light bulb moment for me. It was like I finally figured out. Steve's approach is you put your big piece of paper, whatever you're working on the board, and he actually marks on the floor what he calls a toe notch for you that's about 10 feet back from that, and he keeps having you stand back in that toe notch until you feel compelled to do something. You go up, you make the move, you make the gesture, you get back to that toe notch again. And you don't go up and paint until you're feeling really compelled to go do something. So that completely tapped into that intuition that I wanted to work with of what comes from within. But it also had a pause built in where that design mind was working, where it's like, okay, this is getting way too cluttered. I need to quiet it down. Just if things felt intuitive, but yet also worked with design at the same time. And that was just so life changing. I actually had to leave the workshop a few times and go in the bathroom and cry, but it was just crying out of relief of like it took years to figure out this is how I want to paint. So that's what I've been doing ever since. That's pretty much my approach. I've studied with Steve as a mentor a couple times since then, and because I appreciate he has a sort of Zen approach to painting that is very quiet, very much about listening, that I really appreciate. So that's how I got here today.
That's great. I learned a couple things just hearing you talk about, how you got here. So I appreciate what you said. Let's take a look at your work now. So, Robin, this is the first piece we're going to talk about. This is called A Head Full of Dreams. So, can you tell us what's going on in this piece?
Yeah, I think one thing I come back to a lot is I'm very interested in that contrast between control and freedom, or order and chaos. And so a lot of my work is based on a grid pattern in some form and then breaking free of it. And that's very much what's happening here. The grid in this one is maybe a little more subtle than in some of them, but I just like that idea that I think I want my work to feel very free and expressive. And it feels more so if it's breaking out of something that's controlled. And that's what I was working with here. And there's many, many layers on this painting. And then I build up in layers, and then I use a sander, a rotary sander, to reveal little surprises here and there. So you'll see some little spots of blue that was from a very early underpainting that are popping through on it.
Also, you seem to have different little areas. I'm thinking of your title, A Head Full of Dreams. Are these different little areas representative of dreams, or is it more intuitive than that?
Yeah, it's not at all literal. In fact, I didn't have a title for this, and I heard a Coldplay song, or their tour, I think, was called A Head Full of Dreams. I thought, oh, that fits that painting perfectly. So it's not literal, but it did feel like there's these mystery elements that are unexplainable in it. So it felt sort of dreamscape to me, but nothing literal about that.
And how large is this painting?
This is a 36 by 36 on wood panel. That's kind of my go-to. I love that size and I love wood panel.
So how long did this one piece take, and how long does it usually take you to do a piece this size?
Um, I work very slowly and I work in multiple layers. So from the time I first put something on this to the time I considered it finished could have easily been a year. But it's because I keep coming back to things. I will sand it down and then find things that want to come out. And so I'll work with that for a while. And I tend to like to edit things back, calm them down, and then it gets too calm. So I come in and mess it all up again. So there's this dance back and forth. I would say most paintings, like if I really focused on this, maybe a couple months I would spend on it would be pretty much the norm.
So can we assume you're working on different paintings at one time?
Yes, yes, lots.
Sounds good. Let's go to the next one.
Robin, just a question about how you work on paintings at the same time. I remember watching a documentary about Howard Hodgkin, the British abstract painter, and he had this marvelous studio and hundreds of paintings that he would lean face against the wall and then every morning come in, turn them around, see if he had anything extra to add to that one, turn it back. What does your studio look like? What's your setup? How does it like practically work for you?
Yeah, I like his approach. I like that. I have overflowed. We have a daylight basement in our home, so it's a pretty light basement area, which is my studio. And I have overflowed with my paintings into our TV room, some out to the garage. So they are all over the place and they just kind of rotate through. But I like what you were saying there, that to me, it's important not to look at them for a while and then bring them out and then I see it fresh. And it's amazing to me. Sometimes I look at something and think it's so obvious what I need to do now when it wasn't before. So there's a rotation and overflow everywhere that I'm working with.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way of working. Why do you often use the square format in your paintings?
I just really enjoy that. I do sometimes do rectangular, but I couldn't tell you why, but maybe it has something to do with that order versus chaos. And the square is definitely an orderly form. It's very stable. And maybe that allows me to, I'm just thinking this off the top of my head. I'm not sure, but maybe that allows me to have something really stable to play against with the more wild marks. But it is definitely my favorite format.
It's really interesting. Can you tell us about this one? I love the color palette here.
Thank you. Yeah, this is an older one, and this is you can probably clearly see that how much influence the quilting patterns are. And this is based on a half square triangle in quilting, which is taking a square and dividing it on a diagonal. And so I played with that pattern over and over in here. And I really like that that provides a structure, and yet then I break that structure over and over. And again, I'm very interested in that high value contrast. I like that, the lights against darks. This is actually an older piece. I did this series maybe about 8 years ago, and it was kind of interesting because I had abandoned this one because I did a lot that I liked, but then there was many that didn't work and I'd have to go back to the start on this once I put that grid in. And when I was getting my photos for this, I saw this and another one in this series, and it sparked an interest. It's like, oh yeah, I started back into that series again. So it was 8 years ago, but it's come back to me. I have more to work with on those half square triangles.
I think you've really achieved a great balance between that order and chaos you're talking about. Lovely gestural strokes, like glimpses of like, forest or, landscape behind it. But then this relatively subtle grid pattern imposed on the top. There's a great balance in this one.
Thank you. Yeah, I enjoy playing back and forth on that.
So on your current work, do you still practice what Steve Imony suggested? Do you back off and wait before you go back into it?
Yes, I do. I even put a little notch on my floor to remind me to get back. And I do go up. Sometimes on pieces like this, when I'm working with grids and straight edges and that, I may go in for a long time and be working up close and more orderly. But for most of those gestural kind of movements, it's a back and forth where I really try to get some distance on it and listen to what the painting needs.
This one's called Discoveries. You mentioned an integration between order and chaos. And before you said that, I was thinking it's an integration between geometric and organic, and which is maybe a different way of saying the same thing. But I think all of them show a lot of geometry, but also a lot of organic kind of feeling in it. And obviously, in this one, you have integrated text into the piece. So, do you often work with text like this, or is this just once in a while?
I do use it quite a bit, mainly for the graphic quality of it. It's not that I'm interested in particular words. In this case, and this series I was working on, I did want to create that chaos, almost like city noise in the background, and there was lots of it, and the bombardment of signs and messages and all of that in the background, and then a quieting that I could impose on that in the geometric shapes, the circles especially. So yeah, it's definitely, these are definitely organic versus geometric, chaos versus some order, some structure. And I do like on these that this is another one that's built up in many, many layers, and then a lot of paint and sanding to let certain things show through and certain things get obscured. And I'm always interested to see what does show up, because and in this case you can still read the word discoveries pretty much, but the most of them I've knocked back, and it's always kind of fun to see if there's like messages that need to come out in these pieces.
The center of this painting, there is in a sense a center because it's a square, and I could focus on that circle in the center. However, because of the repetition, my eyes are drawn to other circles, and then I'm led around according to the maybe patterns created by the fonts on here. Is there a center to it for you? And how would you ever know that this is finished? I feel that it's finished, but how do you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, uh, there is not a center to me. Like, in more traditional paintings, we'll have a focal point, and my pieces rarely do. I'm more interested in movement and trying to get, I'm happy to hear you say that you do move around, because I work pretty hard on that to get you to be moving through this painting instead of just locking into one area. So that is important to me. How I know when something's finished, that's a tough question. Usually what I do is, in my house, I have a mantle over my fireplace is left open for 36-inch paintings to rest on. And there's a wall that is left open for 24-inch paintings to be hung on. And I put them up there, and if I can live with it for a while, it's done. And usually I will look at things, and something's going to bug me, and then they come down, they go back to the studio. And the other criteria is if my husband says he's gotten bored looking at something too quickly, because I want there to be depth and mystery and things to discover in my paintings. And so if he says, "Oh, I've looked at this for 4 days, take it down," then I know it's not working right. So that's my crude way of deciding if something is finished or not.
I love it. Yeah, following your intuition, but also
Yeah.
relying on, yeah, other people to some extent because you're so invested in it. What are the reactions to your paintings from other people, not your husband?
Well, some people love them. This was a very popular series, especially I seem to be, I think I sent a lot of colored pictures for some reason, but I'm really drawn to neutrals and black and white. And that seems to be this was a very popular series. And certain ones are more popular than others, and this one, people really liked it. They liked the urban quality about it and then the quieting of it. I've heard that quite a bit. And just this is interestingly has been attractive to younger people more than some of my pieces. There is a number of these sold to people in their 30s, and that it kind of surprised me. There's something about them that seems to be for younger people.
This piece, I think, is one of my favorites of yours because I can just roam around in it. And I feel like I could stay in it for a long time.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to the next one. This one's called Joyride. Is there a special meaning to the title?
I just started this one, and often when I do start something, I don't have a lot of intention behind it. But this one, I did want to have just some warm, more vibrant colors, and I wanted it to feel very playful. And that is all I started with. And so then there was a lot of just trying to get some rhythm, some motion, some playfulness to it. And again, my titles often come almost serendipitously, that's a word. And I had this one sitting around, and somewhere I think it was a newspaper article talked about somebody taking a joyride, and I just liked the title for this, that it was just had a playfulness to it.
So, with his playfulness, it seems like you've abandoned the grid in this one. Is that accurate, or is there a grid underneath there someplace?
One thing that working with Steve Imany as a mentor, he pointed out to me, he says, your work always has a grid in it. And I thought, I would say this one doesn't. It didn't have an intentional grid to it, but you can sure see verticals and horizontals that play off of each other over and over. So I think there is a little underlying structure. Even when I try to let it go entirely, it still seems to come out.
Yeah, also this one, not quite as much as the last one, but I feel like there's a lot of places to go in this piece.
Yeah, that is definitely my goal. I don't like to hang artwork and get tired of looking at it in a month. So I want to see things that have a lot going on, that there can be discoveries 6 months after hanging it. You still might find a little area that you didn't spot at first. That is important to me.
So you also said you were playing with colors a bit more. How often do you break out of your neutral approach to painting and try something that's a little bit more vibrant like this?
I will definitely have phases, and I know right now I'm moving back into black and white neutral. It's like I'll do color for a while, and then my eyes just want to go back to black, white, and neutral. That's my favorite palette is neutral, but with some little pops of color in it. I think that is probably my ideal palette. But I do get tired of it. And I do want to mix it up and not just do the same thing over and over.
Robin, can I just ask about the tools that you use? I can see some maybe scoring or scratch marks at the bottom right. Those white arcs seem to be, well, I don't know. How did you make these marks?
I use a lot of different tools. I try to avoid using the same size paintbrush, so I will have a range of paintbrushes from, on a 36-inch, maybe my biggest brush will be 4 inches wide, down to smaller ones. Those white marks are made with something called a color shaper, which is a sort of silicone tool. It's like a spatula almost. And it allows me to scrape thin layers of paint across and give that effect there. And I will use anything within my grasp. So those scoring marks could be just a stick that was sitting nearby that I will make marks with. One of my favorite tools is an old credit card of just for something that just acts sort of like a wide palette knife.
That's really interesting. I really like the texture in this one. And I remember what you were saying before about quilts. The word tapestry comes to my mind. And there's a part at the top left of it that really reminds me of the color palette of Paul Klee. And we haven't talked so much about your influences, but who are your touchstones?
Oh, I like Paul Klee. I never made any connection with my work in his, so that's interesting though. My first art love was probably de Kooning, and it was because I saw those wild, juicy marks that I wanted to paint that way. It just, and I just loved the thought of big brushes of paint, and you just put it on, and it was all so quick and intuitive. And I read his biography and I was so stunned to learn that Woman One took him, I think it was close to 3 years to paint. And to me, it looked like, oh, that would be so much fun because you just throw paint on that canvas. And it was actually a very important thing for me to learn that to look wild and spontaneous, it does take a long time. There's a lot of editing that has to happen, a back and forth that has to happen, studying where there's some negative space to make the wild stuff look wilder. So anyway, he was one of the first ones. I love any of the abstract expressionists, Klein and Motherwell for their big gestural marks. I'm very, very fond of Cy Twombly and his loose, scribbly marks. I love his stuff. Those are probably the main people that really popped out at me.
Robin, what I notice about this is that the temperature has dropped, the color palette is completely different. Can you talk a little bit about where these blues and greens come from?
This one is called Ocean Breeze. Yeah, I would say this is probably my go-to palette if I'm not working in neutrals. And I grew up in California. I was, always going to the ocean. And now I live about an hour away from the ocean. So that is my go-to place. My go-to place if I'm going to go somewhere to relax, it's definitely the ocean. So those colors are just always deep within me. I love them. I love them for relaxation. And we are surrounded here in fern forest, so there's all the blues and the greens, and that is pretty much my natural palette. I do find if I've been painting with these colors that my next painting is probably going to be warm colors because I tend to respond to whatever I've just done. I kind of usually want something different afterwards, but I do love these colors.
This piece also seems to have a lot of depth. I know that say warm colors project, but it feels like the blue is coming at me with the rest of the tones in behind the blue. Did you try to create that, or is that just a happy accident?
No, I was very interested in depth in this, so I'm happy that you picked up on that. I was interested in if I'm just playing with cool colors, because you're right. Usually, if I put something nice and warm there, it's going to really jump forward. But with that narrow range of colors, can I still get some depth? And the brighter blues do come forward more. The lighter greens will pop forward a little more. And so that was fun to play with, to try to achieve depth just with a very limited palette like that.
Well, somehow you did it. So we're back to the grid on this one.
Yeah, this is another one from that series using the half square triangle. Uh, and again, the ocean colors, it's kind of a lot of things that I like. I sometimes like to hint at something representational just to let people have a way into it. And there's definitely some water elements in this one and some plants. But I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to over prescribe that. But I do love when something will just hint at something a little representational. And so this one was called Splash. And I love the foamy, white, watery quality that came out of this one. But again, playing off of the half square triangles, some order, but that craziness of nature breaks through it all.
So actually, even though you're back to the grid, this does remind me of the one we just talked to, Ocean Breeze. They seem kind of related in a way, maybe because of the similar palettes, but I'm assuming that was unintentional.
Yeah, that comes up a lot. And I think even that last one kind of goes back to what Steve Imony told me that I always have a grid in my work, even when I think I don't. So that other one, I didn't think I had a grid, but it still kind of feels grid-like. And this one is definitely grid-like. Water is my favorite element, so it does come up a lot for me that I go for watery colors.
And as I spend time looking at this one, the squares or the diamonds actually look like windows to me, and some of the white elements, it's like they're splashing out of the windows.
Yeah, I do like that depth, creating that depth, and that some things look like they pull forward more than others.
I'm getting this sense of a balance again between order and chaos. And I keep thinking about like right brain and left brain thinking, maybe like a more whole view and then a more focused attention, which is built into your process of moving forward and stepping back and kind of reflecting. What's going through your mind and your body as you're painting? You've given us a little glimpse about that toe notch, but are you thinking? Are you talking to yourself? Are you listening to music? How do you actually paint? What's happening to you?
I try to totally shut down the thinking mind as much as I can. That's very hard to do. I tend to want to analyze things. So the goal is to get that shut down. So I will do a lot of things like if I'm getting too tight, I will throw a piece of paper on a table and just close my eyes and paint on it just to loosen up and to be very intuitive. The goal is to keep staying as playful, as intuitive as I can on pieces. But there is a time that I do stand back or sit back, or like de Kooning, sitting all day long in a chair looking at a painting as part of the process of just, analyzing, okay, how is the eye moving through this? Am I creating some depth? How could I make this area deeper? So there's definitely that, but I try to keep that part separate from when I actually have a paintbrush in my hand. And I allow lots of time for analyzing, thinking about it. But when I'm actually painting, I really want to listen to what needs to happen. It's very much a dance for me of movement back and forth, trying to keep free. Sometimes, especially in early stages, I will put music on. Usually I like to be working in silence though, and really trying to listen to what that painting is telling me.
When you start a piece like this, you start with a blank canvas or a blank panel, and it sounds like you try to start with a blank mind too, but you have to start somewhere. So do you lay down some kind of color and then see what comes up in yourself that you want to express in your painting? I'm curious about how you start and if you have any kind of direction in mind at all, because like you say, it's hard to completely forget about thinking.
Yeah, I almost always work on a white prepared panel. That's my favorite thing. I like the crispness of that white. I tend to work with a limited palette, and so I will often start like this piece. I think I knew I wanted it watery, and I knew I wanted these cool colors. And I knew eventually I was going to put the grid on, but that was all I knew. So at the very beginning, it's just standing back and trying to feel, okay, what feels right to do right now? Maybe it's I want to work with this dark indigo color for a while, and I'll go up and make gestures and marks with that. And I stand back, and then maybe it's like, okay, that's gotten kind of dark. How about working with some lighter green? And I'll come back up and work with that and get back. So the early stages on this are very free, very loose, all kinds of marks. There's tons of things that have been edited out on these paintings that first are absolute chaotic messes of everything, and until it gets too much, and then I start editing it back. And when I get an underpainting of all kinds of gestures and colors and shapes that I'm really interested in, Then I'm coming in with the grid and starting to organize it a little bit and pushing some things back more, letting things come out. And that grid is again a dance between creating some order and then needing to mess it up again and add something else on top. So it's very much a back and forth for me through the whole painting.
To me, it sounds like a very complex dance.
It's a totally fun dance when I'm not thinking and I'm in that intuitive mode. When I get down to the thinking mode, it gets very complex sometimes and frustrating sometimes when it doesn't work out because I have put grids on these paintings and felt like I couldn't get out of it once the grid was there and it didn't work. And all I can do is basically start over painting from the beginning again. So when it works, it feels really good.
State of Wonder, this reminds me of Discoveries a little bit. Are they related somehow? Or
Definitely.
it,
That's the same series of building up lots of background material, working with magazines, junk mail, anything that happened to be floating around that had some text on it, building up layers of that, and some the geometric shapes. I just like that. I live in Portland, so I'm 10 minutes, I'm downtown Portland, and another 10 minutes, I'm out in the middle of the forest. So I kind of get both worlds, and I like that urban energy, but then I've got to calm it down. And so this is, I think the text in this just feels very urban to me. And then I come in with the circles and get some order to it. So yeah, it is in the same series as Discoveries.
Maybe this is a difficult question to answer, but I'm always intrigued by how artists think of themselves. What metaphors do you apply to yourself? Like, what's your approach? It feels like you're recycling, repurposing, rearranging, remixing. How do you think of yourself?
That is a beautiful question that I've never been asked before. And I'm not sure if I have a good answer for that. In some ways, I think I'm a scrap quilter. I think I gather up all kinds of odds and ends, all kinds of imagery, and I like it usually fragmented and mysterious. And then I put it together and create some order out of it. That is what comes to mind. But it's also that intuitive side of just trying to be a listener and to listen to the world around me and take in, when I'm out for a walk in the forest, of just trying to be quiet and absorb what is there and then channel it into my work and listen to what that piece is saying to me, what the painting wants to do. Is it too busy? Is it telling me to quiet down? And that's very important in my work, is being a listener. Great question. I'm going to be journaling on that question a little bit more and thinking about that.
so our next piece is something quite a bit different. So tell us where these came from.
Yeah, so these are my totems. I took a workshop with Michael Shimchuk a while ago, and I know you've done an interview with him, and that's where this format started for me. Is that long? These are 6 feet tall, 9 inches wide. And I have fallen in love with this format. I just finished two of them just this last week. So I am doing, this is kind of my current passion, is doing these totems now. And what I love about these almost feel like a sort of visual poetry to me. And again, that scrap quilter to me, where I'm putting together different pieces that I have made and trying to get one impact out of them. The way I do these is I love to make papers of all kinds, of just painting and scribbling and doing the Cy Twombly things, or writing notes to myself. I write a lot, and journaling and that, printmaking, drawing. And I keep all my papers, just a big bins of all my papers that I've made. And then when I'm making a totem and I want a particular feel, I go sift through those papers as a starting point and try to pull the ones that give me the feel I want. These are actually three different series that were displayed together. The first one, I call it Urban Notes. The middle one was called my Zen Notes series, and the third one is called Earth Notes. So each one of those is having that in mind, that I want an urban feel, that I want a Zen quiet feel. And then I piece those together, mixing them in with painting back and forth, trying to give that feel in a long piece that almost can be read, almost like a poem with little fragments that tell that story. So they are my favorite things to make right now. I'm doing a lot of these.
Well, and we still see the grid there, but they're like strips of grid.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and because the mark making I do tends to be very chaotic. Some of it is like very loose calligraphic writing, all kinds of crazy marks. I need to come back to that structure to get it to hold together and not just be overwhelmingly chaotic. But yeah, it is stack grids, I guess.
So there's so many different things going on in each one. I'm going back to an earlier question. When you start a totem, do you kind of have an idea in mind? Do you start in the middle and work up and down, or do you start at one end?
Usually, I will have a few key papers that I really like and I want in that piece, and I'll lay them down, and then I'll work around it. So I'm doing a lot of arranging before I actually glue anything down. So I'm kind of getting a feel for working all over at the same time of how things are interacting. And then I might glue them down, and then there's always things that don't work and they need multiple layers, and some things get covered up altogether, and sometimes paint comes on and obscures certain areas. All of my work seems to have this give and take. It's like I put something down, I then have to quiet it down. It's too busy, then it's too dull, so I have to add some energy to it. So there's always the back and forth, and these are done that same way.
You described these as visual poems, and that's my trigger word.
Ah.
As an English literature teacher, I am contractually obliged to ask anyone um, um, about the relationship between poetry and your painting, but even more so with you, because you said you had a PhD in English. So how does that background affect your work? There must be some connection.
Yeah, and I was an English literature teacher too. So yeah, it's definitely comes through there. It's funny because I don't directly pull from my literature background, but what I find happens quite a bit is I will be working on something and an old fragment of a poem will come to my head while I'm working. Like I was working on a piece and it had some purple plum shapes in it, and I couldn't get the words "so sweet and so cold" out of my head from William Carlos Williams. And that happens all the time. A lot of T.S. Eliot goes through my head, or, a certain slant of light becomes a title of a poem because, or of a piece, because they're kind of embedded in there and they just come out. But I don't ever start thinking, oh, this is going to be about an Emily Dickinson poem. It just, things will come out that way.
I got to talk to you about the middle one here. You called it the Zen totem, and all of them, but particularly the middle one, really strike me as extremely Japanese. What's the influence of Japanese art and culture on your work?
I'm just an admirer of it. And I have, done some studies in Buddhism and Taoism, and I think that comes through sometimes. And I love the quietness. I love the simple gestures. I can't do what they do. They do it so beautifully with the most simple of gestures. But that is something I haven't fully studied it. I have definitely looked at it, and I have friends who are calligraphers. They have taught me different fun techniques for making letters. I am attracted to the lettering. And I think a lot of that comes from that Japanese tradition. And so that comes through. I also don't want to make my work look like imitation Japanese work. So it's a tricky thing there that I admire it. I want the feel of that, especially that quiet Zen feel. But I know my work is not like true Japanese artists who are working with those principles that I don't understand really.
Yeah, it doesn't look derivative. And at the same time, like at the top right, I can kind of maybe see the influence of Matisse there. And also it's I can see elements of maybe graffiti or bits of urban decay as well here. So it again, coming back to that idea of recycling, repurposing, and kind of composting all of the influences in your life, it feels like something original has bloomed here. So it doesn't look derivative at all, no.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that. And my life does go between, as I said, being urban and I mean, I there's no place I love more than the streets of New York. I mean, I'm really happy in a big city, but I also need to get out of there and have the quiet. So I think both of those play back and forth in my work.
So now we come to your 100-day project, and there are so many beautiful images here. I would love to talk about each one, but of course we don't have time for that. But could you tell us an overview of the project and what it did for you?
Yeah, so the 100-day project is done on Instagram, and it's a very loosely organized project. Everybody creates whatever they want to do, and they set the parameters of whatever that could be. I mean, I think some people write and some people paint, and I chose collage. And the idea is you do that for 100 days. And one thing that was very freeing to me, if somebody midway through said, well, it doesn't have to be consecutive days. It's just about doing 100 of the same thing. I've done it twice. And this was the first time through I did, these are 4-inch collages. And I just did it again this year. And they were, I think, 5 by 7 inch collages. So the idea is I did it just to get into my studio every single day and get working on some little thing that I could access easily. I did make it through twice. I tried it another year and I just fell apart and didn't do it. But what I found is that I learned so much doing this thing. And I think the primary lesson for me is how deep our reserves are because I did not think I had 100 collages in me when I started the project. And there's definitely times that I lull along the way and think, I just can't come up with anything. But it surprises me how there is always more in you that if given time and showing up all the time, that I can keep creating more original things. And that's a really good, valuable lesson that you can just keep going. There's more in there. So I have learned a lot. I love setting them up at the end when I have all 100 done and really studying them and I would say out of the 100, there's maybe a quarter or a third of them that I really like. This is a hand-picked group here of my favorites. So they don't all work. There's lots of duds, but that's, really valuable information too. And I like to look at the end and really study what works for me. What is it that I love? I love a loose line. I love those calligraphic marks. I love some text. It's just really a nice way to learn about your own preferences by seeing what comes up when you do these over and over.
Do you know what I'm noticing again and again in these interviews, and you've just really brought it to the fore here? That kind of digging down into your reserves, finding hidden reserves, but also the persistence and dedication, commitment, determination over the years, but also through each of your paintings that might last a long, long time, several months or, even a year. That's what distinguishes you and, the other artists we've interviewed to amateurs who don't quite who have skill, who have talent, who have ability, who have a vision, but just can't quite see it through to the end. So I really, really admire your work ethic and just that belief that you just keep going because you know that there's something there. And it feels like you've proved it so clearly with this 100-day project.
Oh, thank you. That's nice to hear. And I think there is, I know I felt this way when I first started, and like I said, saw de Kooning and thought, oh, you just go up and splash some paint around and you've got a nice abstract painting at the end of the day. And it's a very rude awakening to find out that's not the case, that it takes a lot of work and a lot of redoing and a lot of failure and all of that to get anywhere. It's the biggest challenge I've had in my life. I think I would go through the PhD program again before struggle with some of these paintings.
And then we have one more image from the 100-day project. So tell us about all this green.
Yeah. So one way that I have found to make the 100-day project manageable is I think of it as a week at a time, and I set a theme for myself. So it might be exploring thin line, it might be exploring thick line or shape. And towards the end of the last one, I was kind of running out of ideas, and I decided to work with a color I didn't like. And to me, it's that very grassy. I mean, I like it in of itself in nature, but I don't work with it at all. That vivid green. And so I did this week of working with that kind of grass Kelly green, and it ended up, I was so surprised that I really liked those pieces. I didn't expect it at all. It was kind of just take on the challenge and get through with it. But it's been really valuable to me because I have now started using green in my paintings, that vivid Kelly green. I've always kind of went for some muted greens and the yellowy greens, but that Kelly green was tough for me. But I'm finding I really enjoy it in my paintings now. So it opened up, there's been a number of discoveries along the way of things I didn't think I liked, and there it is. I like it.
That's a great story. And unfortunately, we have to stop. I think you are extremely articulate about your work and how you do it. And I feel like I've learned a lot, not just about you as an artist, but about painting in general and about a way to approach it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I have enjoyed your guys' questions. You got me thinking quite a bit. I'll have to go journal for a while and figure my thoughts out again. But thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so
Thanks again,
much.
Robin.
Thanks, Paul.